Hello, everyone. I will call this meeting of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Military Veterans Affairs and State Police to order. Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Chair Morgan.
Here.
Representatives Wilson. Grayback.
Here.
Morris.
Here.
Cabot.
Here.
Green.
Present.
Slaw.
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Let's see. First, yes, and Rep. Wilson is walking here now, to be clear. That's what he shared with me. Let's see. We will not have absent members, so we will. Rep. Brayback moves to approve the minutes from the prior meeting on March 19th. Without any objections, the minutes are approved. Okay. I'm so glad that we are here today. Our intent is to hear from LSB on the budget recommendations for MSP and DMV, House Fiscal, sorry, for MSP and DMVA. And I'm very excited to present these budgets today. So I will jump right into things here and hand things over to Michael Nossent.
Good morning, members. I'm going to start with an overview. Well, sorry, Chair, we have to vote to adopt the bill.
Oh, whoops, sorry. I was just so excited here. Great. Rep. Morris, well, okay, do we need to, I was thinking we were presenting first. We may need Rep. Wilson.
Well, unless we have the votes to adopt the bill. Go ahead, ease.
Okay, we will be at ease at call of the chair. All right. Okay, I will call this meeting back to order and jump right back into things. Rep. Morris moves to place the House substitute for House Bill 4248 before the subcommittee. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Chair Morgan.
Yes.
Representatives Wilson.
Yes.
Grayback.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Cabot.
Yes.
Green.
Yes.
Slaw.
Yes.
Great.
Unanimous.
Okay, now House Fiscal Agency staff, Michael Nossent, will give an overview of the contents of the bill, and then we will have time for questions following. Oh. Wait, what is the number?
5509.
Apologies. What do we do with that then? There is no.
Now substitute a new bill.
Yeah. you say 4248?
Yeah, I said 4248, but that apparently is not a bill. Where does that come
Call
from?
for a new motion. We're doing.
Okay, apologies all. Okay, so I will, yeah, what's the formal language for that?
Just make a new motion.
Okay, Rep. Morris moves to place House substitute for House Bill 5509
There we go.
before the subcommittee. Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Chair Morgan.
Yes.
Representative Wilson.
Yes.
Brayback.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Cabot.
Yes.
Green.
Yes.
Slaw.
Yes.
All members voting yea.
Great, thank you. We will try again here. And now I will request that House Fiscal Staff Michael Nelson gives an overview of the contents of the bill.
Thank you, Chair Morgan. Morning, representatives. House Bill 5509 is the chair recommended bill for the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. There should be a House fiscal summary in front of you. There's one for state police. There's two of them. I'll be going off with the DMVA summary. So, going off the table at the top, see the chair recommends gross funding of $265.1 million. This is $16.7 million above fiscal year 24 appropriations for a 6.7% increase. For general funding, this is a $8.7 million general fund increase from the current year, or 8.8%. Much of these increases are from item number 1 down below. Executive recommended $16.4 million for the 3 veterans facilities, the Grand Rapids Home for Veterans, Chesterfield Township, and DJ Jacobetti. House concurs with that increase. House concurs with a number of executive recommended items, including number 2. Number 3, executive recommended $10 million for Selfridge Air National Guard Base. This would be a repeat of the fiscal year 24 $10 million appropriation for a $0 increase. The House includes $7.5 million for Selfridge, representing a $2.5 million decrease from the fiscal year 24 one-time appropriation. On the next page, item 4 at the top, the House recommends a $3.5 million increase to the Veterans Homelessness Grants. This is both, so a $3.5 million increase would represent a total of $5.5 million in fiscal year 25. In current year, $2 million was recommended. The executive recommended a decrease of $500,000. House restores the $2 million in one time and adds $3.5 million as an ongoing line item. Item number 6, House includes $1 million for the Veterans of Foreign Wars, or VFW National Home. This is a small town community near Eaton Rapids that supports veterans and their families in times of difficulty. Executive does not include this. House also includes item number 7, Vets Ride Pilot Program, just under $1 million. This is a program to provide reimbursement grants to eligible organizations for certain veterans or ineligible veterans for health and medical purposes and for transportation for assistance in receiving benefits claims. Eligible veterans be those that live not less than 30 miles away from a VFW, or I'm sorry, a USDVA healthcare facility or a Veteran Service Officer Assistance Office. Item number 8, House concurs with the executive transfer of $300,000 from the deposit into the Michigan National Guard Tuition Assistance Fund to provide for funding for a joint enlisted enhancement program that provide $1,000 referral bonuses to soldiers or to individuals who refer soldiers to enlist in the National Guard. Skipping down to 11, House provides a $100 placeholder for further discussions on supporting the implementation of a homeless veteran directory for the MVAA to better track and assess veterans in the state. House also includes number 12, another $100 placeholder to consider funding grants to veterans who served during times of peace from the Emergency Grant Program, which is a part of the Michigan Veterans Trust Fund. On the next page, item number 14, House reduces $5.5 million general fund for deposit into the Michigan National Guard Tuition Assistance Fund. This is to align with the balance of the fund and expenditures and to keep it in line with the $15 million cap placed on the fund by 2014 PA 259. With the House recommended appropriation, that would leave a projected $15 million balance in the fund in fiscal year 25. Moving on to boilerplate. Executive deletes many standard section reporting, which the House retains. Section 210 is the legislative contingency authorization. The House retains current year funding and does not concur with the increase to the contingency funding. House does concur with the executive in section 214 and deletes the requirement to maintain a publicly accessible website that identifies and tracks performance against metrics for the department. Next page, section 220, the House also concurs with the executive in deleting the severance pay report, which requires reporting of any payments to high-ranking department officials for severance pay. Section 226, House concurs with deleting the State Administrative Board transfer, which authorizes the legislature to reverse any intertransfer of funds executed by the State Administrative Board in the case that it does so. And section 229, House deletes the requirement to submit the submission of the department's annual strategic report. House retains many changes and revisions or deletions to reporting. I will skip to section 411 on page 5. Grants to veteran service organizations. The executive recommended to delete unexpended funding for the VSO grants to be designated as a work project, and House concurs with this revision. On the last page in the back, section 610, the executive recommended a section to authorize the department to align appropriations of non-general fund sources with revenue, allowing the transfer of fund sources for the veterans' homes. The House does not include this section. Section 701 is the boilerplate pertaining to the veteran homelessness grants. The section is largely the same as it was in fiscal year 24, except with the revision of permitting grants to be in any amount as long as it does not exceed $250,000. In the current year, it is specified to be grants of $150,000. And section 703 is the new boilerplate related to the Vets Ride pilot program, where it specifies eligibility criteria for both veterans to receive free transportation and the organizations or entities that can receive the reimbursement grants for the program. These would include both public and private entities. And with that, I will take any questions.
Actually, before we jump into questions, while folks are thinking about them, I wanted to highlight a couple of key things in the DMVA budget. First, I want to share that the budget recommendation that you're looking at today was shaped by recommendations from members of this committee, the department presentations that we had this year, and the residents throughout the state that we heard from through the process. And I'm very pleased that we were able to include funding for nearly every general area that was cited as a key priority. We were able to include funding for a couple of new initiatives utilizing some work project dollars and department funds that were currently not being utilized. And so a big priority for me was utilizing funds currently within the budget rather than utilizing new state funds or general fund dollars. A couple of key highlights included the increasing eliminating veteran homelessness grants program to $5.5 million. This is something that was shown to make a significant impact in last year's budget, and I believe additional funds in that priority area will really help house more of our veterans throughout our state and serve them. We've also added a new pilot program we were referring to as Vets Ride that would help rural veterans access veteran services, whether that be VA appointments, health appointments, or otherwise. This is something that came up through a number of conversations over the last year with the concern for veterans being able to access these types of services. We're continuing our investment in Selfridge with an additional $7.5 million. I believe this is a really important investment for the future of our state. We're continuing the investments recommended in the executive recommendation around modernizing our veteran homes. And then there are a couple of placeholder items in there, one being a veteran homelessness directory. This is a recommendation that came from MVAA as a mechanism to try and better track where our homeless veterans are and how we can serve them. This is something happening in Minnesota, but through the conversations, it's a few $1,000 cost, but we are trying to see if it is something that would make sense to try and include in this year's budget, or if it needs additional work between now and next year. So we've included a placeholder to continue those conversations for now. The second placeholder is some funding for the Michigan Veterans Trust Fund. There's an effort to try and expand eligibility of the trust fund benefits to peacetime veterans, but we want to assess whether more funds are needed in that trust fund to be able to do that or not. So we'll have some ongoing conversations there. And then lastly, I just want to note we've utilized $5.5 million from the MingTap program. These are funds that are a surplus in that program area, so I utilize those funds rather than them just lapsing back to the general fund at the end of the process anyway, to better be more efficient in how we're setting this budget. So a few highlights there, but we'll turn it over for questions. Okay. Okay. Are there amendments? Let's see. I will see if these are numbered. They're not. Okay. So we have amendments. I will defer to Rep. Cavett.
All right, thank you, Chair. Let's see.
Sorry, Vice Chair Cavett.
I have amendment to House Bill 5509 H1, and this amendment would reinstate language found in boilerplate section 306. Specifically, it adds back in that money expended from the building fund must not exceed the estimated revenues for the fiscal year in which they are made, together with unexpended balances from prior years. I move my amendment, Chair.
Okay, amendment moved. Is there discussion on this amendment? I guess the only discussion comment I would make is I believe in consultation with House Fiscal that additional funds beyond what is available would not be able to be utilized currently. So I don't necessarily have any issue with this. I just believe it's already the case that the department wouldn't be able to expend funds that are not available. Other comments or questions? Okay, Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Chair Morgan.
Pass.
Representatives Wilson.
Pass.
Raybeck.
Pass.
Morse.
No.
Cavett.
Yes.
Green.
Yes.
Slaw.
Yes.
Chair, you have 3 yeas, 3 abstains, and 1 nay. The motion does not pass.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Rep. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment would be looking at the concept of helping with our suicide prevention and doing everything possible, giving every tool in the box for our veterans to get help with suicide prevention. So this amendment would reinsert language previously found in boilerplate section 416, which authorized the department to contract with or provide grants to local healthcare providers to accelerate research and suicide prevention efforts, making sure that the veteran would have access to all care, both private and public. With that, I move my amendment.
Okay, amendment moved. Is there discussion or questions? Rep. Morris.
Thanks, Chair. Do we know why this was removed?
Yes, I can answer that question. This language was included in last year's budget. There was a bit of confusion about whether it directed the department to carry this out or whether it simply allowed them to do it. The language as written is it allows the department to do this, but it was not necessarily utilized. And so to remove the confusion, we just simply didn't include it this year. Personally, I have no issue with it being included. It just allows the department to do something, but it doesn't require them to do it. So I have no issue with this language being included. I think the suggestion of taking it out was simply to remove the confusion over whether it would be provided or not. Any other questions or discussion? Rep. Raybeck looks like she has a question. There was no funding for it either. That was the issue. So it allowed this to be done by the department, but did not provide funding for it.
And I guess part of what I'm also wondering is, we have under the leadership of Chair Conlon, we have a package of bills around veterans' mental health, and I guess I just don't know enough to know how this amendment dovetails with that. And so I guess that is something that now I want to research and I'm curious about, because we know that there are so many issues particularly around the incidence of suicide with veterans. And I guess there are lots of different places that we could have this funding and this directive, and so I guess I'm just curious. I feel like I want more information that we don't have right now.
Michael, is there anything you would add to that?
This, just to kind of reiterate what the chair said, that this was included as a new section in fiscal year 24. It authorized 3 FTEs, but didn't provide any funding, and it was permissive and not mandated. So without the funding, the department opted to not pursue it because it was kind of an unfunded requirement. It would have had to have been supported through other ongoing appropriations.
So that's the answer. As you can tell, we had some discussion about it in the development of the budget for some of these reasons. So I guess my recommendation would be that I wouldn't necessarily support adding this back today without some more discussion with the department, or if we were to identify funding in the future. But it is a very specific treatment versus overall funds for mental health. I think it would be great to have a more comprehensive conversation around how those funds are being utilized and the other legislative package that's being considered. There would still be time if this is something we decided to include, add back in the next phase in the budget process. But I guess my intention today would be to pass, and that I'm not necessarily opposed to this, but I just don't know that I would want to add it back in right now. Any other discussion or questions? Okay, clerk, could you please take the roll?
Chair Morgan.
Pass.
Representatives Wilson.
Pass.
Raybeck.
Pass.
Morse.
No.
Cabot.
Yes.
Green.
Yes.
Slaw.
Yes.
Chair, you have 3 yeas, 1 nay, and three passes. The motion does not pass.
Thank you. Let's see. Rep. Green, did you have another amendment? Rep. Slaw has an amendment.
Thank you, Chair. This amendment relates to the boilerplate section 410, in which we speak about county counselor or veteran counselors, and the amendment would be to reinsert language that's found in the boilerplate, specifically that they must maintain its staffing and resources to process a minimum of 500 benefit claims per year, rather than just having a goal of 500 claims per year. And with that, I would move my amendment.
Great. Amendment is moved. Discussion or questions? I guess I would ask the clerk to explain a little bit about what we did with this this area, because this came up in a few areas of the budget where there were the similar types of language.
Yeah, in both the budgets for DMVA and state police, there's a phrase that requires the departments to maintain staffing and resources necessary to do a certain service. All of these sections have been declared unenforceable by the governor in fiscal year 24 and in most other prior years also, and the House typically retains them. The objection to them is the separation of powers between the legislature and the executive, and that mandating or requiring the department to, I guess, mandating staffing levels for something is something that's the executive would argue would be the purview of the department and not for the legislature to mandate. In this section, the House kind of rearranged the language a bit to try to accommodate that concern or respond to it and not require the staffing and resources necessary, but to retain the benchmark goal of 500 claims being processed a year.
So I guess I would just add that I personally disagree with the notion that it would be unenforceable, as we are providing the budget for the department and asking for this level of service as a result. And so with that said, my intention in updating this language and changing it was to hopefully provide language that is more enforceable as a target goal that we can strive for, to maintain that level of service in a way that is not simply ignored, to be blunt. So, are there questions or discussion, or is there discussion on this point? So my intention is to vote no on this amendment simply because I don't disagree with it, but I'm planning on sticking with the language that I changed in the budget to ensure that there's a goal, with the hope that it is perhaps more enforceable than language that is currently being deemed unenforceable. Any further discussion? Rep. Morris?
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question. Do we get information on how many claims are processed per year? Because then you could assess if the funding is at the proper level without attempting to do something that's unenforceable. I'm just wondering. It looks like I don't see a report based on this, but I didn't know if somewhere we get this information.
The department issues was once quarterly. It's now annual metrics reports where that is included.
Okay, without seeing any further discussion or amendments, clerk, could you please call the roll?
Chair Morgan.
No.
Representative Wilson.
No.
Raybeck.
No.
Morse.
No.
Cabot.
Yes.
Green.
Yes.
Slaw.
Yes.
We have 3 yeas, 3 nays. The motion does not pass.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further amendments? Okay. So, let's see. So without any further amendments, I will ask the clerk to please call the roll on the, oh, sorry, Rep. Wilson, wait, we already,
We gotta make a motion to move it, so.
oh, gotcha, yes, well, yes, I was thinking we already moved this early, we did move this earlier.
It's, we moved to adopt, and now we're moving to pass the bill with recommendation.
Gotcha, okay, thanks, everyone. So Rep. Wilson moves to report the House substitute for HB 5509 out of the House Subcommittee and refer it to the House Standing Committee on Appropriations with recommendation that it pass. Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Chair Morgan.
Yes.
Wilson.
Yes.
Raybeck.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Cabot.
No.
Green.
Pass.
Slaw.
No.
Chair, you have 4 yeas, 2 nays, 1 pass. The bill is recommended, HB 5509H1.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much, everyone. So now I will call for a motion to place House Substitute HB 5510. Making sure I have that language correct. Rep. Braybeck moves to place House Substitute for House Bill 5510 before Subcommittee. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
On the motion to adopt House Bill 5510, Chair Morgan.
Yes.
Representatives Wilson.
Yes.
Braybeck.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Cabot.
Yes.
Green.
Yes.
Slaw.
No.
Chair, you have 6 yeas, 1 nay. The motion passes.
Great, thank you. I will now request that House Fiscal Agency staff, Michael Nosson, give an overview of the contents of the bill, and then we will have time for questions following.
Turning now to the House Fiscal Agency summary document in front of you for the state police budget, 5510. At the top of the table, the House recommends funding of $982.4 million. This is an $89.1 million increase from the current year, or a 10% increase. Of the general funds, this is a $68.6 million increase from the current year. Much of this increase comes from item number 1 below. The House recommends $50 million general fund for the climate change emergency disaster relief. This is to provide financial assistance to local units of government to cover costs of natural events caused by climate change that results in negative economic impacts, severe damage, injury, or loss of life that would not otherwise be eligible for reimbursement from federal sources. Item 2, the House includes $7.5 million total for the Public Safety Academy Assistance Program. This is a program that was initiated in 2022 that this funding would continue. It provides scholarships for police academy recruits and assistance with salaries and police cadets. In Part 1, $4.6 million is included, and $2.9 million is repurposed from an existing work project balance under the state police for federal ineligible expenses. So that brings the total of $7.5 million available for this item. Item number 3, House concurs with the executive of a $5.5 million increase for trooper recruit school annualization. Item number 4, House does not include executive recommended $5.5 million general fund for law enforcement training, recruitment, and retention grants. On the next page, at the top, contracts and services. The executive recommended to remove one-time funding of $1.6 million for contracts and services, move it to ongoing appropriations, and increase it to $2 million. House reverts back to the current year funding of $1.6 million in one time, and eliminates the $2 million for as an ongoing appropriation. The $1.6 million in one time would also allocate $200,000 for traffic control at the Michigan International Speedway. Item 6, capital security. Executive included $1.4 million general fund and 13 FTE positions for additional security officers to be assigned at the Capitol building to operate and monitor weapons detection equipment installed at the entrances. House includes $500,000 and authorizes 6 FTE positions. Item number 7, the House includes $500,000 general fund to cover additional pension-related costs resulting from the enactment of House Bills 4665 through 4667, which would make changes to membership eligibility to certain retirement systems for law enforcement officers. This is inclusion of this item in the state police represents a part of a larger piece of $18.5 million total for the state employees' retirement system implementation costs. Item number 9, House includes new funding of $400,000 general fund for university cold case program partnerships. This would allocate $200,000 each to Western Michigan University and Northern Michigan University that have existing programs working with the state police to provide workforce development training related to criminal investigation tactics, forensic science, and review of cold homicide cases. Item number 10, House includes new funding for firearm disposal of $250,000 general fund. This would provide for the administrative costs and staffing and travel related to securely disposing of firearms received by the department under statute. Executive does not include this. There is a corresponding $250,000 decrease to in-service training. This is supports the MCOL's in-service continuing professional education program to ensure licensed law enforcement officers maintain training and professionalism on certain issues. And that will be the rest of the Part 1 items I'd like to highlight. Moving on to boilerplate. House decisions are much the same as DMVA in regards to the standard sections. Section 210, House retains current year contingency authorization funding. Section 223 is a standard section not in DMVA. This was a new section fiscal year 2024 that provided requirements for grants or projects awarded to single recipient organizations and transparency reporting. The House concurs with the executive in deleting this section. Many sections were declared unenforceable by the governor in the current year, which the House retains. I will skip to section 801 on page 6. We have 3 section 801s. One is a one-time section that was deleted for the community-based crisis response pilot program. Executive recommended a new section 801 related to the $5 million for law enforcement training, recruitment, and retention grants. House does not include this as it's related to one-time funding. House does include the new boilerplate related to the climate change emergency disaster relief to provide details regarding that program. And section 803 is the new boilerplate section which appropriates the funding from the 2022 work project for federal and eligible expenses and repurposes it for the Public Safety Academy Assistance Program. Section 804 is the new section for the one-time funding for Public Safety Academy Assistance Programs and outlines the specifics to the program as far as scholarships and increases for salaries. And that will be all the changes to highlight.
Thank you, Michael. A couple of comments just before we jump into questions here. I want to highlight a couple of items. The first being the Public Safety Academy Assistance funding. The executive recommendation included funding for local law enforcement training and recruitment and retention, and we utilize those funds to make sure they're supporting the existing program that we heard from members of the committee as well as members of local law enforcement as a critical priority. The program that is directly providing financial assistance to train law enforcement officers to do that work. So it felt like it was in a very similar vein, but my understanding is that this is a current program that is working really well, and we want to make sure we're continuing to support that program. The second is the slight increase to the school safety funds that was included in the executive recommendation, and we concurred. I think that is an important piece to make sure we're keeping our schools safe. The third is a new program in there, a new pilot for the cold case partnerships. This is a program that is a partnership with Western Michigan University and Northern Michigan University and MSP, where the students and the state trooper posts are working together to solve cold cases in our communities. I think this is a really exciting program that I'd love for us to provide some assistance and support for, as it is also somewhat expensive to provide. So I think this is a key way to support students and young people getting into law enforcement and to encourage this amazing partnership with MSP and the work that they are doing. Lastly, I do want to highlight we included funding for staffing for the secure disposal of firearms program. This is something that I felt was a critical priority. If we have residents and communities bringing in firearms, expecting that they are part of a buyback program, we want to ensure that the state is actually meeting the intended and the stated intention of returning those guns. So this is really important as well, and I will defer to questions from there. I think I saw Rep. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the bill, I'm looking at page 38, line items 19 through 29. In this boilerplate for the Climate Change Emergency Disaster Relief Fund, it seems like there's a pretty large burden placed upon the local units of government. So how can this local unit of government prove that the natural disasters that are not federally eligible are related to climate change? So it looks like the only way that you're able to get this money is if the natural disaster that's natural is related to climate change. And then secondly, lines 28 and 29, another statement in there says that it's happening with greater frequency. Again, how are the local units of government supposed to be able to prove that in order to get those funds, instead of just saying, this stuff wasn't covered by the feds, here you go. So I'm trying to figure out how this is actually going to work, and then those local units of government's proving that it's climate change.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That is, I actually think that's a phenomenal question. And the critical piece of this is that we have communities in our state that have been heavily impacted by increasing frequencies of storms and flooding and damage as a result of our changing climate. And several of the communities that we've had in recent years have not been able to receive federal funds because the damage has been significant, but not significant enough to hit the threshold for the federal government to come in and support. And so the intention of this state fund is to help our communities throughout our state if they are dealing with the consequences of our changing climate. And so I guess a very specific example might be you've probably heard of 100-year storms and 500-year storms that I have seen more than once in my lifetime, and I am not 100, and certainly not 500 years old. And so I think that we are seeing that the support for our local communities is necessary. In an ideal world, we'd be able to receive more federal funds for every instance where this has been the case. But if we don't do something as the state, then we're leaving these communities on their own to try and pick up the pieces after multiple significant storms.
So may I follow up with that question?
Yes, and then I'll go to Rep. Morris.
So if we're linking this to climate change and then with greater frequency, are we going to say historical data shows that we have 9 thunderstorms a year, so number 10 is covered? Or how are we going to say that thunderstorm or that hailstorm is funded, but that one isn't, because that one's climate change, but the same natural event is not climate change? That blows my brain, is how we're going to be able to prove that to get the funds.
I hear what you're saying, and we can definitely take a look at that before final passage to make sure that this language is drafted in a way that meets our goal of helping these communities, because I do believe that is really important. Rep. Morse.
Thank you, Chair. I can actually give you a very specific example of where something like this could be used. So in my district, in Texas Township, we had what was about a 3-year flooding event, which was like a slow-moving disaster. So typically when FEMA is looking at whether they're going to fund something, it's something like a flood or something that happened, or a hurricane, something that happens, it's a 2 to 3 day event. It causes major destruction in that time. And that's typically what rises to the level of FEMA stepping in. But for my local government, they ended up having to put their own task force together because there was nothing available from the state. They ultimately did get a FEMA grant after several years of trying, because I think ultimately over 20 homes were destroyed by this slow-moving disaster of 2 lakes that were bowl lakes that historically they had filled, but due to very high groundwater and precipitation for several years, it was a very difficult problem to solve, and they were very disappointed that the state didn't have any resources available to them, especially when FEMA was telling them no. So I understand what you're saying, Rep. Green, about the climate change piece, and that language potentially maybe is a little squishy, maybe it needs to be tightened up, but the thought behind why it's being put into place, I certainly appreciate.
Further questions, or Rep. Brayback?
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate it. I have a question about the University Cold Case Program.
Yeah.
I actually have 2 questions. One, are those cases specific to the universities?
No.
So it can be statewide, and because I know that we have one in our area, that in my district, that I've spoken with our local mayor about several times. Are there ways, like, do municipalities request to work with the students? Like, how will this work?
So these are 2 existing programs that are partnerships with MSP, their regional post directly. So one is through the Northern Michigan Post with Northern Michigan University, and they've been working to solve cold cases in partnership between students and MSP.
Okay.
The university is paying for a faculty member and the resources on their end, and MSP is partnering with kind of, I don't know exactly how to explain it, the like the classroom experience, and they're like literally solving cold cases. Yeah. Basically, the university is providing additional staffing resources that MSP may not have for cold cases. We've had a challenge with recruiting enough law enforcement officers and troopers, and cold cases are unfortunately something that often gets overlooked because it maybe isn't an immediate priority, but there are still victims who have never had closure for that case. And so the students are helping solve cold cases that may not otherwise have anyone looking at those cases. So there's one in Northern Michigan, and then there's one in the region around Western Michigan University that is a partnership as well.
Do we know how they choose the cold cases that they work on?
I was told this information, but if I remember it,
I can find
it
out.
would be a miracle.
I think it's really helpful, again, since we have one in our area, and you're absolutely right, like the families continue to struggle and suffer without any closure to this. So that's super helpful. Thank you.
Well, and this is also a bit of a workforce development program that you are giving students hands-on experience working directly with law enforcement, so that the hope is that a lot of those students, I met some of them up in Marquette earlier this year, and these students were extremely enthusiastic about the work that they were doing, and I felt very confident that a lot of them would then go into law enforcement. And I'm not sure how many of them were sure they were going to do it before, but a lot of them seemed pretty sure after being part of this program. So that's what why I wanted to highlight this program and include some funding for it. Because it is very expensive on the university side to provide the level of professional staffing for the faculty for that program. And it's also a very small program because there's only so much that you can do in that space. So it's, small class size and high expenses means it's a pretty expensive program to do, but it's having a direct contribution to the state. So thanks for asking that. Any other questions or comments? Okay, amendments. There are amendments. I know that there are, and so I will look to Vice Chair Cabot.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment, and this amendment reinserts the language removed from section 407 regarding the school safety report. Specifically, it adds that the report must include the incidences and analysis of school safety grants. I move my amendment.
Great, thank you. Let me double check this. Michael, was this one of the,
This is section 407 related to reporting based on grants. It was removed here.
Page 28.
yep. Do you recall why that was removed?
Saying the grants have been issued and they're done.
Oh, yes, okay, so the reason this was removed is that the grants have been issued and that they are completed. So I guess the suggestion was that language would no longer be needed at that point. Okay, any discussion of this item? Okay, clerk, could you please call the roll?
Chair Morgan.
No.
Representatives Wilson.
No.
Brayback.
No.
Morse.
No.
Cabot.
Yes.
Green.
Yes.
Slaw.
Yes.
Chair, you have 4 nays, 3 yeas. The motion does not pass.
Thank you. There is another amendment. Rep. Slaw.
Thank you, Chair. So my amendment relates to the bill itself, H1, and the amendment would be to amend page 6, line 7, after 1.0 by striking out the 303,000 and actually inserting 600,000 to provide an increase and this is for the death benefits for public safety officers dying in the line of duty.
Okay, the amendment has been moved. Is there discussion?
Oh, I moved my amendment. I didn't say that, did I?
Thank you. Is there discussion? I guess I'm curious, Rep. Slaw, could you share more about why the,
Happy to do that. Thank you. So I have a bill that's in that would double the death benefit to those officers who are fallen in the line of duty, public safety officers in multiple ways. And so this would just allow for the funding to happen so that there would, if that bill actually gets passed, which I'm hoping it will, because we've not seen an increase since it was put in place many years ago. So hopefully we would see a desire to try and up that death benefit for those people that lost life in the process of protecting us.
gotcha. Thank you very much for that explanation. Questions or comments? I guess my only comment would be I think if that bill were to pass, I would, I think, be open to that amendment. There were a number of requests that came to us from bills in the process that we did not include. So I guess I intend to pass on this, only in that I'm not necessarily opposed to increasing this amount, but just that I don't know that now is the time to do that. Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Chair Morgan.
Pass.
Representatives Wilson.
Pass.
Brayback.
Pass.
Morse.
Pass.
Cabot.
Yes.
Green.
Yes.
Slaw.
Yes.
Chair, you have 4 passes, 3 yeas. The motion does not pass.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other amendments? Any discussion? Okay. Yep. So if there are no more amendments, I will call for a motion to report House Substitute HB 5510 out of the House Subcommittee and refer to the House Standing Committee on Appropriations with the recommendation that it pass. Representative Morse makes that motion. And clerk, could you please call the roll?
On the motion to report the House substitute for House Bill 5510 to the House Standing Committee on Appropriations with recommendation that it pass. Chair Morgan.
Yes.
Representatives Wilson.
Yes.
Brayback.
Yes.
Morse.
Yes.
Cabot.
No.
Green.
No.
Slaw.
No.
Chair, you have 4 yeas, 3 nays. The motion is passed. House Bill 5510 is recommended to full committee.
Great. Thank you all so much, everyone. The only remarks I want to make are just thank you very much for the engagement, dialogue, and discussion. I know that a lot of times that isn't necessarily the case in Lansing, but I, as somebody who came from local government, I really firmly believe in discussing ideas that are put forward by every member. And I think the comments and input that I heard from members of both sides of the aisle on our committee through the process have been extremely helpful in crafting a budget that I'm very proud of and that I look forward to continuing through the legislative process. So thank you very much, and without any further business, this committee is adjourned.